Hello again, everyone. Before we get started, I want to do another quick shout out. These productions are not easy to put on, and I hope that you'll help me thank the entire production team. I wish you could see them all backstage. I wish you could see everyone who's worked so hard on the graphics and the videos and put this whole thing together in a way that's so incredibly beautiful. So please help me thank them right now. Public-private partnerships have been a hallmark of our ocean conferences and central to the goals of ocean conservation and sustainability. We are so fortunate to have several of the leading philanthropists in ocean conservation with us here in Palau. Here to lead a conversation on partnerships for the ocean, new directions, and initiatives is Taholo Kami, ocean convener from Fiji and Tonga. And let me just add, sometimes the best thing you can do is bring to the world an incredible child. And so please also thank Taholo for the wonderful gift of song he's given us. His daughter, Mia Kami, was the one who opened the conference with her song, Rooted. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Taholo Kami.
Well, thank you, everyone, and welcome to this session on partnership. We've got some very special people, and I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce them as they come in. But first of all, we've got our special presidential envoy for climate change, John Kerry. We have Mr. Mark Benioff. Donna Bertarelli, Ted Waite.
I like those shoes.
Thank you.
And His Excellency President Suranjal Whips. Thank you. You can take your seats. As you can see, we've got a special panel today, and only for 30 minutes.
Wow.
And so I want to put this into context in terms of what we can do after 1.5 wonderful days discussing what we can do with the oceans. I'm going to cut the issue. I mean, we're ocean champions, we're ocean people. I just want to come down to two critical things, but conversations and partnerships for the ocean, new directions and initiatives. Here in the Pacific, we're on the front line of climate change and the front line of ocean change. What we're also finding is that we're also, let me take this mask on, we're also in this unfolding security crisis that adds to what has been a dual crisis, but possibly even more significance to what's at stake in this part of the world. I've been inspired by the passion and the commitments over the past 2 days. But there are two issues I want to bring up here that I hope our panel can address in the questions that we'll be asking them. Very quickly is equity, the first one. Equity in this discussion. We all love our ocean. We all want to conserve, protect, and manage. But it's different terms for those of us who are discussing the same thing. We're playing in different fields. Some are playing like the professional sports in the stadium. Some of us are doing hopscotch in the car park. But we're still talking the same talk. And the challenge of equity is how do we pull this together into meaningful partnerships that can bridge this? The second thing is vulnerability. Very familiar for those from small island states. We're passionate. We talk about large ocean states, but after the pandemic, the picture that was left for many of us is still aid-dependent small island states, despite these massive, beautiful pieces of ocean, that if you put it together, is larger than the continent of Africa. And I saw the map of Africa in the previous presentation. But that's the scales we're talking about. And these are the issues I want to bring up here This whole issue of equity and vulnerability and the opportunity to get this right. Partnerships can bridge the economic divide. And then how do we do this, leaving Palau, moving into the UN Ocean Conference, and make this a reality? So from this panel, as you can see here, we've got a great example of the diversity that comes to the table when we discuss oceans. The representative from the most powerful nation in the world. Then we also have a representative from one of our smallest island countries, but a large ocean state. And then we have people doing special things for oceans and filling these gaps. And so I'm not going to take anything further here, but saying, how can we be a catalyst in this discussion? And then how can we inspire the kind of shift that we all desire in the room here? So I'm going to start first with just straight questions, because we're short of time. And starting with John Kerry. John, thank you. And an inspiration for a long time, with the beginning of all our ocean conferences so far. The question here is, our ocean is both a victim and a source of solutions for climate change. Finding solutions to the climate crisis requires the engagement of all relevant stakeholders. What can the United States do to mobilize multi-stakeholder efforts that help keep the 1.5 target within reach?
Tahalo, thank you very much. Fantastic. And this panel is a great panel. Mostly these three folks here in the middle are just doing amazing things. They are so committed. And they are a key to this answer to the question. From the moment President Biden appointed me, our mission was to try to restore America's ability to have credibility in this field and to help move people doing climate diplomacy. So we began immediately by focusing on countries all around the world that are in that 20 that I talked about yesterday. 20 countries. I think it's really helpful for everybody to sort of have your formula that you lay down as to how you see this problem. And I see the problem. We had a famous bank robber in America called Willie Sutton, who was asked, why do you rob banks? He says, well, that's where the money is. So question, why do you go after the 20 countries? Because that's where the emissions are. And if we focus on those emissions and those countries begin to move and do adequately, we're going to win this battle. We're going to solve the problem. But to get there, we need resources. It's just plain and simple. No country in the world, not China, not the United States, and we're the largest economies, has enough money to solve the problem. And no one country can solve the problem. Even if the United States and China, let's say, went to zero tomorrow, we'd be better off, but we're not going to solve the problem because the other countries are feeding more and more CO2 up into the atmosphere, and that's the problem we face. So the question is, how do you get from here, where we know we are, we've defined it again and again for 30 years, we have to take that and translate it into a policy. I've come to believe, and I believed this when I left being Secretary of State, and I said it very publicly, because no country has enough money to do this, we are going to really need the private sector, philanthropy and business, to step up and to help us mobilize literally the trillions that are needed to effect this transition on the schedule we need. And we need trillions. The UN Finance Report shows that we have a deficit in achieving our goal of keeping 1.5 of about 2.5 trillion to 4.5 trillion per year, every year for the next 30 years. And we've had trouble finding $100 billion from the developed countries, right? So how are we going to do this? We have to mobilize literally trillions. So when I got this job, one of the first things I did was reach out to the places where the money is, the emissions and the money. And I went to Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and State Street and Wells Fargo, the 6 largest banks in America. And I said, tell me how much you're willing to invest in new technology, new energy future, the new energy economy over the next 10 years. And they did it. They came back. And they said, we will put 4.16 trillion into this transition over the next 10 years. But mind you, folks, that's not giveaway money. That's not concessionary funds, as we call it. That's investment money. So you have to look for a return on investment. You have to have a bankable deal. Can you do that? The answer is yes. Producing energy, you sell energy, produces revenue. Transportation, trains, planes, automobiles, you sell, and that produces revenue. So you have the ability to actually bankroll in the private sector a legitimate, normal energy deal which might deploy renewable energy, whatever, 100 gigawatts of solar or of geothermal, whatever. As long as that revenue stream passes the test of being able to support the financing, you could bank that in the open marketplace. That's one way to approach it. But you can't always bank it. So what do you do where you can't bank it, but you want to be able to create a deal which people have enough comfort level they could invest in? And there's a thing called a power purchase agreement. Many of you may not know what it is, but a power purchase agreement is a long-term agreement that a company signs with either another company or a country. It says for the following amount of money per kilowatt hour, et cetera, over the next years with maybe a rate of increase through the years, we'll pay the following for power. And you make a contract and you provide the power, or you provide the alternative. So just quick answer is we need to bring that money to the table, but we have to de-risk that money in certain instances where the politics or the landscape of the deal are tricky enough that those people with the money are going to pull back and say, I can't invest in that. That's not safe enough, or that's not going to be a better enough return. There, you've got to be able to create a vision that helps those people to be able to make that investment. I think that's doable in a combination of philanthropy, private sector, public money. It's called blended finance. You blend the finance, you can get the deals, and you can move. But we have to take this on. We have to begin to do this, folks. Can't talk about it anymore. So you say, what can the United States do? We are working. We're actually working with His Royal Highness Prince Charles, who put together a thing called the Sustainable Markets Initiative. We are putting together a group of the First Mover Coalition that we created in Glasgow. We're going to come together in London in the next weeks, and then again at the World Economic Forum. And our hope is we can put out a template which will actually guide people for how we can put this money on the table and invest. If we do that, we can win this battle.
Thank you, John. Mark, you're a businessman, a successful businessman, philanthropist. What can you do in terms of a platform for ocean change in these circumstances?
Well, I think what you're hearing from Secretary Kerry is absolutely the right direction, and I'll add to it just a little bit, but thank you, Mr. Secretary, for what you're doing, especially the creation of the First Mover Coalition with the Department of State, and the idea to get these companies really to get a net zero supply chain. Because what we're talking about, we have to get to a net zero world. When we look at the ocean, the number one issue is it stores 20,000 gigatons of carbon, the soil's 3,000 gigatons, 200 gigatons per trillion trees, and it is doing the heavy lifting as we are emitting more CO2 and methane. It is really doing the heavy lifting of absorbing that, and that's why the ocean is getting hotter and causing all of this instability. So how are we going to get to net zero? So thank you for the First Mover Coalition, and also thank you for the Net Zero World with the Department of Energy, another one of your key initiatives to decarbonize countries and to really focus on how are we going to get the carbon out of our supply chains. For a company like Salesforce, we're a 75,000 person technology company, one of the largest software companies in the world. Number one is we are a net zero, fully renewable company today. And I think for all of my peers and for every other company in the Fortune 100, our message to them is you need to become a net zero company as well. Now, net zero is a critical first step. Second step is we also need to sequester all the carbon that we've put out. We've put out 100 gigatons of carbon since the first industrial revolution. We have also deforested on our planet from 6 trillion trees now down to 3 trillion trees. Every trillion trees stores 200 gigatons of carbon. That was 600 gigatons of carbon banking that we no longer have. That's why we've also created 1T.org, which is our trillion tree program, to get 1 trillion trees. And I know there's many people in the audience who have helped and made commitments to fund trees. Our U.S. chapter already has commitments for 50 billion trees. The U.S. government also, in the infrastructure bill, just funded $8 billion of trees. So thank you for that through the Replant Act. And this is a critical next step. And the third step, I think, is very much we need to energize an ecopreneur revolution. A lot of entrepreneurs like myself, instead of starting tech companies, about a quarter of them now are starting ecology companies. Companies to really get that carbon out of the atmosphere. Yesterday I was in Sydney, Australia. I was with an amazing entrepreneur named Guy Hudson. He is the CEO of a company called Loam Bio. He is building biologicals that when farmers can use to grow crops, he is able to double the amount of carbon in the soil, which not only regenerates the soil, which is something that I'm extremely interested in, because the better the soil is, the more carbon absorbent it's going to be. And he has gigaton opportunity to deliver that capability with these biologicals. That's just basically putting these microbes back in the soil that have gotten taken out. Another entrepreneur we work with is Zach Parisa at a company called NCX. He's using artificial intelligence coupled with landowners to encourage them, don't cut down your trees. Encourage the biodiversity. And he now has more than 3.5 million acres of trees in the United States, primarily in the South, to get that moving. And another great entrepreneur that a lot of people here know, Danielle Fernandez at Sustainable Ocean Alliance, who has created 45 companies who are all focused on ocean health. And I think when we look at that ecopreneur revolution, this is a tremendous opportunity to start to address what John is articulating.
Thank you, Mark. We'll move on. Donna, here, the fastest woman in the world to sail the ocean. Also a advisor to the UN on the blue economy and an ocean philanthropist. What does the blue economy bring into this picture?
So I'll try to go fast because I see the time is running. I think you all know that the blue economy really consists of 4 main sectors. And we heard about a lot these past 2 days about the shipment and energies and decarbonization and renewable energy, and it's going in the right direction, and we need more momentum, and that is, that brings hope. Then we have tourism, and I know that, the tourist industry has been placed to its knees these past 2 years with COVID, especially on small island developing states, which have had a harder hit following the tour. But tourism is coming back, and it's bouncing back. And I believe, really strongly believe, that it will come back stronger and better in those areas that other countries envy, and that actually people are dearly waiting to go back to, such as here in Palau, where the ecosystems are pristine, because that's what people understand now, and that's what they really appreciate. So I'm also hopeful about tourism. It will be resilient, and it will be bouncing back. Then there's the fisheries. And I think on the fisheries, we're lacking behind. I think if we truly want to have a sustainable, regenerative, and equitable blue economy, we need to address the fishery management. We need to have a sound regulatory frameworks. We need to have strong enforcement. We heard this morning, 70% of the global fish stocks are either overexploited or overfished, and 7% are already depleted. Fish is the last wildlife that we harvest at an industrial scale. And we spend annually $24 billion in harmful fisheries subsidies. So how does that connect? How can we continue, and we're businessmen, women, how can we continue to invest in an industry that would not be otherwise profitable without those subsidies? And in June, there will be, the ministry are going to reunite again. They had to stop their negotiation because of COVID. The text is pretty good. Friends of Ocean Actions, we can live with this text. It is the closest that we've ever been to have an agreement. So I really ask the leaders that are here in this room to call upon their ministry and to call upon to the other leaders worldwide. Please, please adopt a resolution. We have to stop those harmful fishery subsidies. And if we do so, we will resolve many of the fishery problems that small island developing states and coastal communities are having. We would resolve IUU fishing. We would resolve human rights problems. We have to get rid of that. And then we know that we need to find a balance between production and protection. So going to protection, and I think, Ted, you have a fantastic tool, which is the Atlas MPA, that shows that we have effectively protected 2.8%. When science tells us that we need to at least protect, and highly and fully protect, at least, so at least meaning it's the minimum that needs to be done, 30% of the global ocean by 2030. Yeah. So we are in a big gap, so how are we going to be doing this? So personally, you all know that I work in creating large-scale, highly and fully marine protected areas, and we have decided with my partner, the Pew Charitable Trust, to double up on our initial commitment for an additional 5 years with a total of $60 million in order to support those countries that actually are trying to reach those targets. And in particular, I wanted to say about the Eastern Tropical Pacific countries. I'm very much inspired of what they're doing, coming together, finding solutions together. Obviously, there's going to be bumps. Not everything is going to be easy, but I think it's a new vision of what ocean conservation should be, because fish know no borders. Sylvia Earle would be here, and she would say that. So we need to work on connectivity.
Thank you.
Nice.
Ted, ocean philanthropists, they've seen you several times at this meeting already. But you do different things differently by working directly with governments. 9 governments at this time. And how do you see holistic approaches to ocean management helping in terms of island nations, in terms of resilience in the current situation?
Yeah, thanks, Tahalo. And we, after about more than a decade of funding NGOs and striving for ocean protection, and we kind of had an aha moment that we really needed to partner directly with governments. And partnerships are hard. It's hard. They're hard in business. Joint ventures. They're hard in life. I love my wife, but we get along great. We have a great partnership. But is it always perfect? No, they're difficult. You have to make a commitment for them to work. And so we've been fortunate enough, and I'm humbled that we have 9 countries that have put their trust in us to really provide the resources, the technical support, the legal support, to do their sustainable ocean plans. But we didn't just get there overnight. It just doesn't happen. We engage in a series of dialogues with these countries over time. We call it the dating phase internally to really make sure that we share the same goals. Because in order to have a good partnership, you have to share the same goals, you have to share the same way of working, and you also have to have a mutual respect for each other and their unique culture, the unique ways of doing things, and also agree on an approach that engages all the citizens and all the communities, the fishermen, as well as all levels of government. And so it's not just a partnership with the government, it's a partnership within the government, because we get fisheries working with environment, working with finance and planning, and then also reaching out into the communities and working with their citizens, their business sector, as well as the educational sector. And all developing this through an MOU where we lay out these goals and we lay out the complete respect for the sovereignty of the countries we represent, because we're just providing the resource. We're just providing the legal support, the science. Everything we do is science-based and based on a process that we have to engage the communities and do these very intensive ocean usage surveys to really understand how the ocean is used, and so we can value the different parts of it. So we can develop a comprehensive plan that all ends up in a wide range of overall law that gets passed that really sets aside which parts are going to be protected. All of the countries that we work with, and for the most part, have agreed to strongly protect 30% of their EEZs. And it's a tough process. It's a tough process. And as you know, in any partnership, there's ups and downs. It doesn't always go like you think it's going to go. But if you have a strong partnership and you have mutual respect and mutual trust for each other, you can get through those bumps and see things through in the political environment, because it's not always popular. You're not always going to you can't make everybody happy doing this type of thing. But I really applaud the strongly committed governments that have put their trust in us to assist them with their plans, because it's their plan. We're just providing the tools. We built the resource and the capacity to do around 10 countries, and I don't know if we can do more than that. And the more we get into it, the more we see that it's a lot of work, and I think when we look at it, I wish there was more people bringing on more capacity and doing more things so other people could do this with other committed countries, and so countries had the capacity. We need to invest in the education and the capabilities so countries themselves have the capacity, because the one thing I've learned is this process to do sustainable ocean planning, it's not like you do it and you're done. You don't just do it. It's an ongoing process. So we hope to build the capacity of the countries we work with, and hope to build more capacity through some educational programs so other countries can do it and then keep doing it.
Thank you, Ted. I'm going to move to President Whips, our host. So, President, you've got the philanthropists here. We also have the United States of America. We've got governments that surround us here in the Pacific and that have big stakes in terms of ocean investments. What do you have to say about what kind of investments for Palau and for the island countries and our ocean developing countries? What sort of investments would make the shift that we need to see?
Well, I'd like to first start by saying I wish Ted came to Palau 7 years ago. Because that's really where we need to start. Developing a sustainable ocean plan is really the key. I think one of the things that we see in developing conservation areas, protecting areas, the challenge is always going to be there. Like I said, the fisherman is going to tell me, how am I going to stop taking that Napoleon wrasse when I'm hungry and I have to provide for my family? We've got to balance that protection with production. But when I talk to you, Ted, one of the things you always remind us is that in doing that, you can always fish less but get more, because it's all about the margin. That's what's important, getting more from whatever we sell, adding value to everything that we do. So it's really taking control of that resource that we have, our ocean, and using it appropriately. But ultimately, the benefits need to get back to the people. So when it comes to the philanthropic community, first step, help us with planning, I think, so that we can build durable marine protected areas that have integrity, not just on paper, but they're actually work and they provide for their people. I mean, that's really the ultimate goal, and that's, the high ambition panel is pushing for 100% managed and a minimum of 30% for the whole world. We're not just saying, Palau, lead, that's not enough. Because if we have 80% in Palau and the high seas are open to everything, and everybody else is whatever they want, it's not going to work. Everybody, every country, and I hope the UN gets behind this and says and demands that we shouldn't just talk about countries sacrificing their resources for the benefit of the world, and then the UN as a whole and the high seas, which are larger, twice the size of what countries control, abused with those big ships that just go and destroy the oceans. That's where I think we need to be starting. We need to be working toward that. But at the same time, let's not forget that these small countries are vulnerable. And people are knocking on doors all the time to try to tear down what we are trying to do. So that's where the philanthropic community comes in, as conservation investors in helping us protect and be able to provide for our children for years to come.
Thank you, President.
Very good.
You know, in summary, we've got just under 2 minutes. Just one sentence, it's the super year for the oceans. What does December look like for you if we do make this work, or if we start some momentum? Just in a sentence.
What does December?
Like this, the end of this year, what do you want to achieve in the super year?
Everything I said.
We're all in that one, huh? How about you, Mark?
I want to see a moratorium on seabed mining. I think that we're ready for that, and this is a critical moment that we all come together around that concept.
Thank you. Donna?
I would like, you said, a resolution for the harmful fishery subsidies. I would like also to have the BBNG negotiations, the high seas. We definitely need this. I would like to call on CAMLR to protect Antarctica for the global good for humanity. It shouldn't be that hard to do. And I know, John, you're supporting this, and I thank you for that. Yes, that's what I would like to achieve.
Thank you. Ted?
I would like to just second the ban or the moratorium on seabed mining and the end of subsidies. That would be great. From our perspective, I would just like to see as many of our countries as possible pass big legislation to really, manage their oceans sustainably. We've got a lot that are really close. I just like to see those. I want to see those through. So.
Mr. President?
When I first talked to Special Envoy Kerry last year when we were planning the ocean conference, he told me, you need to come to the UNGA, you need to come to COP, we need to get the momentum going and get people moving. And what we want to be able to see, I think, from this conference is learn from what we've been doing when it comes to sustainable managing our oceans, and build on that, and hopefully encourage the Pacific and all small island states to go to Lisbon with commitments that say, we want to 100% manage. We want to protect a minimum of 30%. It can work. That's what we need to be able to demonstrate. And I hope that by the end of the year, we can get all the Pacific islands to get together and the SIDS to get together and say, we can do this. And then demand action from our larger emitters who are not even doing their part, and say, you need to do your part. And demand that the UN takes action, and let's protect our oceans. That's what I think we need to be able to do.
Keep it short.
No, I think all of us have to remember that there is a COP 27, November 2nd, and that could mark the end of the year. The most significant thing, this is the year of implementation plus. Implement the things we promised in Glasgow, plus we have to bring the 8 countries that are not yet pursuing policies to keep 1.5 degrees alive. We must bring them on board. Yeah. And those are the biggest emitters in the world. They've got to join the 1.5 track. Mm-hmm. And if we got the high seas treaty with genuine enforcement on the high seas, that would relieve the pressure for a lot of the EEZs and island states, and we could make progress. We need that treaty this year.
Great.
Thank you. Can I just ask, and again, another hand to our panel. Thank you, everybody, for making the time. Special thank you to each of our panelists. I think there's more discussions that will continue outside, but appreciate the time that you've all put into this.
Thank you, Carlo.